Geometry. This is Chapter 1, Section 1.2. This is the first section we're going to cover in our course. We're going to talk about the building blocks of geometry. We're talking about points and lines and planes. Oh my! These different these objects here. These are some of the undefined terms of geometry. They're sort of the basic building blocks in geometry. What undefined terms are? They're things that are very difficult to define, but not too difficult to describe. We can at least get a picture of these things. So we're going to do that. A point, what a point is, we indicate it with a capital letter. And then it just tells you where something is. It indicates a location. It doesn't have a size. So it just gives a location, and that's all. A line, which is made up of infinitely many points, it's just a straight path that extends in two directions. For that, we need at least 2 points to name any one line. We can use the 2-point representation. Here we have the points A and B. There's a line that goes through them. You could call it, for instance, we call it line AB, or we could even call it line BA. And we always represent that with a, like so. This could be line AB, or it could be line BA. We could also call it line L. So I'm going to write the word line and then L. And even this is not necessary, this word line here. That's just how we read it. It's line L, and we use a script lowercase letter for that. A plane, you can think of it as it's a flat surface. It's the things that a line can go through. It has, just like a point has no size, a line kind of has no thickness, and neither does a plane. It's sort of like your sheet of paper. So we can name that with either a capital script letter. Here I chose this plain P, or you could use 3 points that aren't all on the same line. So ABC would be one way to name this plane. And notice how there's no symbol or anything over it like there is with the line. It's just the points A, B, and C together, and that's how we can name that plane. When we're talking about collinear, think about it. When you see these two, break this up. This is co, and then we have linear here. These are things that are on the same line. So there are points that are on the same line. When we talk about coplanar, it's a very similar definition. It's coplanar. This is on the same plane. My little quotation marks, they'll indicate that this is on the same, and this is on the same plane here. So 2 other ways to name line QT. Let's practice this. Well, QT, I want you to picture this as, I'm going to try to redraw this. It might not be obvious, but think of this QT as being like a pencil poking through this paper here. So this would be like the eraser of the pencil here, and that would be the point of the pencil right here. So QT doesn't lie in this plane. It's just kind of poking up through it. So line QT, we can reverse the order if we call it TQ. We could also pick other points in there. You look at QN, that's another way to name that line, or you could go NQ. You could even call it line M, and we usually use a script lowercase letter for that, so it's not drawn as obvious here, but that should be a script or cursive M there. So you just pick any 2 points, and the order doesn't matter. You could also do NT. So line NT, and since we do NT, we could also do TN. We can swap the order. And that's another way to name. Those are all ways of naming this line, that kind of pokes through the plane right there. 2 other ways to name plane P. So plane P, this should be a cursive P here. If we want to name this in a couple other ways, remember, we just need 3 non-collinear points. So you wouldn't want to do RQS. You might think, oh, that could name that plane, but they're on the same line. There's another plane that could be a plane that comes through the side there or through the top there. So we don't want to do collinear points. You could do RQV, and this you can swap in any order. You could do QVR. The order doesn't matter there. We could do QSV, QSV, or SVQ. Those are all ways of naming that plane there. They're only asking for 2. What are names of 3 collinear points? Well, let's see. We have R, Q, and S. So R, Q, and S. Notice I separated them with commas because I want to distinguish between when we're naming a plane and when we're saying this point, and that point. If we're looking at 4 coplanar points? Well, you can't say R, Q, S, and T because T's sort of above the plane, or R, Q, S, and N. Or you couldn't even say R, Q, S, and P because P is the plane. It's the name of the plane there. See? So R, Q, S, and V. R, Q, S, and V. Now, there are actually some other, if we look back at this question, 3 collinear points. R, Q, and S is one, but there is another line there that's not in that plane. If you look at the line that goes through here, T, Q, and N, so we're going to look at the next page, 3 other collinear points. You can say T, Q, and N. And we could name the plane P in other ways by switching the order. We could line RS. You could call it this could be line L. We could just put L there. You could do RS. You could do RQ. You could do QR. And you could even do SQ and QS. So some other ways to name that. What are 2 points that are not coplanar? Let's look at this one here. What are 2 points that are not coplanar with R, S, and V? Well, R, S, and V are in the plane P. The ones that aren't in that plane are the ones, T's, not in that plane, and N. And you could read this as point T, because that's what this uppercase letter represents. Point N. That's what uppercase letters represent. They represent points. We're going to define some other terms. We define lines and points and planes. Oh my. We're also going to talk about segments. Segments is sort of a part of a line. When we think of a segment, we think of a piece. It has 2 endpoints. So unlike a line which continues in 2 directions forever, a segment has a starting point and a stopping point. It's got 2 endpoints, and we name it with the 2 endpoints and the bar on top. So if you connect OM, segment OM, we can name this as segment OM, and we don't put the arrows for segments. We do put it for lines, not for segments. That indicates that it stops. You don't need to put dots at the end. You could if you wanted to, but we just put a bar with no arrows. You could also call this MO because you don't necessarily have to read it left to right. It's the same segment either direction. Array is sort of, you can think of it as the offspring of a segment in a line. It has an endpoint, but it also has a point that goes in one direction forever. And we always put the endpoint first. So if we're looking at ray MG, we would name it this way. We'd put ray MG. Notice that that's not the same as ray GM. These are not the same ray, because ray GM would actually, it would look like this. It would start at G and it would go past in the direction of N. So those are different rays. Segments and lines, you can switch the order, and it doesn't change what you're naming. Rays, if you switch the order, it can change the meaning. Even there can be more than one way to name a ray. You want to be careful about switching the order there. You always want to put the endpoint first. We'll talk about a special relationship between rays. Opposite rays. Now, these are rays that they form a line, but they also have the same endpoints, and that's a critical part of that definition. So let's look at this line OMG. So, which is really this line OM or line OG. If you look at these rays MG, okay, so there's MG, and look at this ray MO. Now, I'm gonna name it this way. You might be tempted to go, oh, why don't I call it like this? Why don't I say ray MO and then put it like this? Well, it's because we always want to read left to right. This makes you want to say ray OM, which would indicate that you started at O and go to M, and so we don't want to read it that way. So be careful when you're writing those rays. Now we're going to practice naming some of these segments. So if you look at this figure, we've got segment DE. So segment DE is a segment in this figure. We got segment, also segment ED. It's the same segment, just a different way of naming it. You have segment EF, but you also have segment FE. And you have segment that's this is the left piece, DE and ED, and this is the right piece, EF and FE. And you kind of have the whole thing, DF and FD. Those are both 2 segments here. All right, we're going to stop the video here. And there's going to be a part 2 of this lecture, so I want you guys to reference the part 2 in just a second.
The views and opinions expressed in this video lecture, like those of Mr. Vogel, do not necessarily reflect those of the schools of Sacred Heart, Sacred Schools, Board of Lectures, Administration, Media Network, Sacred Heart Schools, or anyone else. Visit our website at sshkoto.org.